Hello everyone. In the previous tutorial we saw how to send data that is coming to our working directory at regular intervals, how to send it to MySQL database. And in this tutorial we are going to see how to send it to two databases, to MySQL and Postgres in parallel. So what we are experimenting with here is how do we process data in parallel. So for the parallel operation we are going to use scatter gather operation. So as you can see here, when we send the data to a couple of databases, for example, if these are different connectors, then sending the data will be done in parallel, and that means it will be more efficient. It will take less time as compared to sending it sequentially one after the other. So in my previous tutorial we built this one. Now let's remove this insert for now, and under this for each. So what we did in the previous tutorial is we are generating CSV data, and for each is going to separate each row of the CSV data as an object, and we inserted it to MySQL database. Now we want to send it to two databases in parallel. So for that, to do that, we need the scatter gather operation. Okay, so it is underscore, we bring it here. So in here we will bring in under databases module insert two times, so one to one of the databases and the other one. So we just need to create two connections here. So this connection, let's make it MySQL insert to MySQL, and specify the configuration. So it is to MySQL, and since we added the driver already in our previous tutorial, it has detected it. We just need to give the other details here. This is localhost and the port number is 3306. Give the username and password. So as I said in my previous tutorial, here are my details. I created this dummy password particularly for this tutorial, so I can come here and provide this password. And also in the previous tutorial in Workbench we created so we created a database and a table. Let's do the same thing right now. Also create database, let's call it MuleSoft and use MuleSoft. I want to create a table. So now if I refresh this here, I should see this MuleSoft database, and the table that we are creating here is, it has these columns, so I can copy this here and paste it and run to save time. So the data will have these columns, and the table name is called person. So just run this. Now if I refresh this and go here, I should see the person's table and the columns are here, so I can connect to this database from any point to do that means. So my database is MuleSoft, and that is a connection. Before moving any further, okay, the connection is successful. Next, let's connect to Postgres. So in Postgres also I have pgadmin here. I will create a database first. Okay, now it has created the database. I can refresh here, and MuleSoft is here. So if I click here and create a query tool here and create a table under MuleSoft database, the same columns. So run this to create the table. Okay, now if I refresh this and go to MuleSoft and go to schemas, I should see the table that I created, which is this one, persons table, and I should see the same columns. So there is no, we just have created a database and a table, but there is no data there. So we are going to send the data to both databases and check that we are writing the appropriate data. Okay, so let's get back to Endpoint Studio. So we connected to MySQL. Now let's connect to Postgres, and this is Postgres, and the connection for Postgres connection type, there is no Postgres here. We make a generic connection, and in the configuration we have to add Maven dependency, and the Maven dependency for that we can get it online. Maven dependency Postgres, you go here, and I will take this one, copy it from here and replace this, finish, and I need the URL, driver class name, username, and password as well. So I have them here. Okay, let me see. So the URL should be this one. Paste it here, and the database name in our case is MuleSoft. Driver class name, this is how we specify the driver class name, and then username and password. So username is Postgres, and password is the same password. Now let's test connection, if it successfully connects to Postgres installed in my laptop. Yep, connection is successful. So now we have connected to both databases. Now we are going to specify the SQL query text and input parameters like what we did in the previous tutorial. So since we are sending data, we insert each row separately. So this will be our SQL query string. Paste it here. So insert into the persons table. These are the columns and their values. We are going to specify them in the input parameters. So under the input parameters, we copy paste this. Since for each it is accessing each row separately, so from each row we are getting the person ID, last name, first name, and address as a payload, and passing it into this SQL query string. Okay, let me, can I maximize this? First, I have to change this to, I have to change this to expression mode by clicking FX. Then I can maximize it. So as you can see here, since each row, since it is going to separate each row, and from each row I can access the values for person ID, last name, first name, address, and CD. We did this for Postgres. We do the same thing for MySQL. Go here, paste this here, and the input parameter also get it from here and paste it here. And we have to make sure this is an expression. Okay, so now we are done. We are going to generate data and send to our working directory. Our working directory is this one that I specified in the previous tutorial. There is no data now. I have deleted it, and I will regenerate data at regular intervals. A person's table that we created in both of them, so it is going to be running every 3 seconds and checking the number of rows. So as we generate data and write more data to the database, the number of rows should be increasing. And the other one here, I have this Python code like in the previous tutorial that generates this data files. Each data file has 10 rows, and it is going to be writing them into the working directory. So I'm writing both CSV data and plotters, but we are going to be filtering only the CSV data and writing them to the databases. So in the previous tutorial, we specified our details on, we did the connection configuration and everything for this operation. So if you didn't watch this the previous tutorial, you can watch that before moving forward with this one. Which will be every 5 seconds. So if you go to here, data is coming in, and if you open this one, for example, you see it is comma separated, and it has the same column names like the table that we created in the databases. So now let's go to here and run this project. So it is deploying, and while it is deploying, let me show you again the code that I have to run the number of rows. So we are going to check the number of rows in both MySQL and Postgres every 3 seconds, and we expect this to increase. The number of rows should be increasing. This one is deploying. Okay, so as you can see, this has deployed, and it is telling us the files that are being processed, and it is printing the payload. Like we saw the details of the loggers that is being printed on the console in the previous tutorial. Now let's check the number of rows from both databases. So you see MySQL has 189, Postgres 212. You see both of them are increasing. MySQL 217, Postgres. As you can see, data is being written to both databases, as you can see, in parallel. And so when we use the scatter gather in such cases, when one operation doesn't depend on the other, if we do it in parallel, then it becomes faster and it is more efficient. So in this tutorial, we saw how to send data in parallel to MySQL and Postgres using scatter gather and also for each. And as I said again, since my data is CSV, the for each is separating each row into separate separate objects, and from each object we can access the values for person ID, last name, first name, address, and city by using the payload dot the column name. So this is it. If we get back the number of rows, now you see it has increased and it is growing. So this is how we can send data in parallel to databases. And in the next tutorial, we are going to see, rather than just sending the same data to to both databases? What if we use some conditions, some logic, for example, if it is based on the data type. If it is CSV, send it to one database, and if it is JSON, send it to another database, or some part of the data, send it to one database, and the other part of the data, send it to another database. So we are going to see how to perform that in our next tutorial. So we are going to be building on this one using the choice operation.